The Right Church, From a Seeker to a Finder. Written by Peter Hoover of Ontario, Canada, in the late 1970s. Published in 2021 by Metamorphose Publishing of Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, USA. Chapter 9
of 16.
Unprepared. Groggily, I turned over in bed to reach out and stop the ringing alarm on my dresser. Outside the window, I could see lazy spirals of snow drifting past the yard light, and from the barn came the sound of a cow mooing persistently. We had weaned her calf the day before. Suddenly, I sat up in bed, wide awake, and turned on the light. This is Christmas, I remembered, the day for Norman and Debbie, with their children, to come for a family meal. Slowly, I turned the pages of my Bible to the book of Colossians, a great letter from the Apostle Paul, but on sudden impulse I turned to a slim, soft-cover book that Jacques had given me. English translations of things written by Jean Vanier, founder of the little fellowship he so admired. A Roman Catholic writing. Would it even be right to read it? I wasn't sure. But oh well. Prove all things, and hold fast to that which is good, I concluded, and began to flip through the pages. What I saw caught my eye. When Jesus sent his disciples out on a mission, he told them to be poor, to take nothing with them. And he told them to do things that were impossible for them to do all by themselves. So it is for all missions. Communities and their members are called to be poor and to do impossible things, such as to build community and to bring healing, reconciliation, forgiveness, and wholeness to people. Does that ever happen? I asked myself. Reconciliation, forgiveness, and wholeness? I pondered the words. Mission is to bring the life of God to others, and this can only be done if communities and people are poor and humble, letting the life of God flow through them. But if people and communities are rich, self-satisfied, proud of their own accomplishments and their own power, if they only want to do things they feel capable of doing, they cannot be used as instruments of the life of God. All they have to give to others is their own self-satisfaction. That's a mouthful, I told myself, and I read it again before flipping to another page. The quest for the eternal, all beautiful, all true, and all pure, and the quest to be close to the poor and most broken appear to be so contradictory. And yet, in the broken heart of Christ, these two quests are united. Jesus reveals to us that he loves his Father and is intimately linked to him. At the same time, he is himself in love with each person, and in a particular way with the most broken, the most suffering, and most rejected. To manifest this love, Jesus himself became broken and rejected, a man of sorrows, of anguish, and of tears. He became the crucified one. Impressive. Probably even true, but not exactly our old order Mennonite experience, I thought. We tend to be wealthy, self-satisfied, and living just for ourselves. Have we missed the real mission of Christ? Troubled, but in a hurry to get my clothes on and to get out to the barn, I kept on thinking. Can the teachings of Christ, his call to a radical life, come through a Roman Catholic publication? I knew the Martyr's Mirror and all the horrible things Catholics have done. But then again, we Mennonites have also done our share of horrible things, I reminded myself. We argue, we split this and that, and get in trouble with the law. Grimly, I remembered what the Welland Tribune had just exposed the week before of how many drugs are coming into Canada from the Mexican Old Colony Mennonites. Not a nice story, but who wants to think about stuff like this on Christmas morning? Nellie and I hurried through chores. The sun came up gloriously, and driving down to the meeting house, a number of us joined Nellie in singing. The first Noel, the angel did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. What does Noel word really mean, Mom asked. We always sing it during the Christmas season, but it sounds French to me. It is, Jacques informed us, sharing the back seat with me. It came from Latin, natalis, but this is how we say it in French. It means birthday. The birth of Christ in this song. I had come to deeply respect Jacques, and trying to see this song from his perspective, I thought of the poverty of the shepherds. The very idea that our King, the King of glory, decided to come to earth as a baby in a barn. How foreign, how utterly disconnected all of this seemed in the light of our prosperous, heavily industrialized and densely populated part of the province of Ontario. Our Christmas morning service in the Dorchester Meeting House was the first one since the 2nd of December, for a change had occurred in the Waterloo minister's schedule. Trying to sing in a chilly, large empty meeting house, my mind turned back to the Prince of Peace church, where no doubt Randy and his sister would be taking part in a glorious Christmas celebration at this exact time. I also remembered the conversation Dad and I had shared regarding that incident. Surprisingly, he had not reacted too unfavorably, and in fact, he had even said that since I am more responsible to make my own decisions now, it would be up to me to choose with whom I want to associate. Along with that, to be sure, he had also added his usual concerns about the dangers of becoming conformed to this world and things like that. I appreciated his concern for me, yet what were the options? We had so little to offer for our own people or for anyone else. I often wondered what Jacques had concluded about us during his time with us. The second song ended, and a baby's shrill cry echoed throughout the meeting house. The visiting minister, Harvey Brubaker, had brought a young family with him. I liked his pleasant way of talking, and for once he did not speak with a thick Pennsylvania Dutch accent. In our area that language had faded out, and only a few old people like Grandpa Stoner could still understand it. Brother Harvey, however, followed the traditional pattern of old order preachers, skimming over a whole chapter while making little remarks about this and that along the way. The service was lengthy, and by the time the benediction came, we were all happy to stand up for a change of position, the Christmas story still fresh in our minds. We closed the meeting by singing Angels from the Realms of Glory. We discovered after the meeting that the visitors had planned to eat with Uncle Lorne and Aunt Clara. Leonard, my cousin, told me their family planned to attend a family gathering at Pastor Alan Miller's place. He was Aunt Jean's brother. Dad had driven down to the city this morning to pick up Grandpa from the care home, for he never liked to miss a service. Now the aged man climbed into the front seat of our car, pulling his cane in behind him. Norman's Toyota already stood in our barnyard when we arrived, and its doors swung open once they saw us coming. Culver's church must let out sooner than ours, Mom commented as she saw the children running for the barn. Rebecca, Samuel, and Nathan always enjoyed their infrequent visits to our place, for their high-rise apartment home in the city did not allow them to own animals. Bertha and Nellie followed the children, but soon brought them back to the house for the special Christmas meal. "My, how Rebecca has grown," Dad exclaimed, smiling at the little girl with yellow bangs and round blue eyes. "Do you go to school already?" Then he reached out to pick up Nathan. The chubby toddler, however, evaded him, and Rebecca could not answer for shyness. "She goes to kindergarten," Debbie explained. I noticed her slight nervousness in her house, probably not quite sure how to act considering the situation. She came modestly, though, in a wine-colored turtleneck sweater, decent black skirt, and her long hair in a ponytail. She knew how important her clothes were to my parents. Norman, however, kept his confident, relaxed manner intact, sprawled on the sofa beside Grandpa while toying with the scatter rug on the floor with the tip of his white-socked foot. Dad asked him about his job and other community affairs. I knew that both of them would carefully avoid any topics that might become complicated, for they had both experienced far too much of that in the past. Grandpa mostly stayed silent, apparently in deep thought. He found it hard to join into a conversation because of his hearing. Yet he brightened up when Jacques sat down on a tuffet right in front of him and spoke to him in slow, clear English. They seemed to like one another in spite of their vastly different ages and backgrounds. After the splendid meal, Mom had roasted a goose, serving it with stuffing. with all the sweets and sours, followed by a steamed pudding. Norman turned to me and asked, "Why didn't you go through high school, John? I thought you had always wanted to become a teacher yourself. Did you change your mind?" Not knowing for sure how to answer, I glanced at Dad, thinking maybe he should explain. Dad, in turn, glanced at Mom and began, "Well, as far as John is concerned, I guess he hasn't changed his mind. But Mom and I felt perhaps the time has come for us to step out of the Welland Bible Institute. So many things keep happening there that leave us uncomfortable." Norman looked slightly amused. "Uncle Dan is still sending his children there, isn't he?" Dad cleared his throat, but before he could begin, Mom interrupted. "Does anyone care for more goose? There's just this little bit left, and it's hardly worth saving." She held up the platter for all to see. I smiled at her when I realized she was doing her best to steer the conversation into a safer direction. Bertha arose hastily as well when she noticed the clock. She needed to report for work down at Bethania by 2 o'clock. "Do I need to comb my hair?" she wondered, rushing back to the mirror above the sink. She raced upstairs and came back with her purse, her car keys, and significantly, a showy Christmas corsage pinned onto her cape. Looking apologetically at Dad, she hastened to explain. "We've got to wear these things the last while at Bethania. I told them I'd rather not, but they wouldn't change their minds." Dad looked surprised, but said nothing. Minutes later, we saw the little yellow bug speeding out the lane. The woman turned to the dishes while Dad, Norman, Grandpa, and I retreated to the living room. Jacques retreated to his room upstairs. The children played in the hallway, and I was about to slip upstairs to read more from Jean Vanier when the telephone rang. Dad answered it, and when he hung it up again, he looked pale. "Bertha had an accident," he announced solemnly, and the rattling of dishes in the sink ceased at once. Mr. McTavish from the other side of the town called to tell us. A flurry of questions went unanswered as Norman hastily made plans to drive down to the Parkside Avenue and Niagara Street intersection where they said it had happened. Grandpa and Debbie volunteered to abide by the stuff, and the 5 of us adults crowded into Norman's Japanese car with him at the wheel. A lineup of cars was already filling Niagara Street back to the next intersection, and the chilling whine of a siren shattered the crisp winter air. On the seat beside me, Nellie began to sniffle, and Mom put her arm around her. I noticed she too had her hanky out, but her eyes were closed. I felt ashamed of myself for not having prayed sooner. We parked the car at Redicop's service and hurried down the sidewalk to join a growing crowd of spectators, one question foremost in our minds. What had happened to Bertha? Dad worked his way up to the side of one policeman, but as yet the officer did not know the details. All we could see was Bertha's yellow car, wedged into the driver's side of a dark green Ford that seemed to be bashed in pretty badly. Somebody was saying that a Mennonite girl sat in one of the police cruisers, and sure enough, there I saw Bertha, sitting beside an officer on the car's front seat. Mom spotted her too, and we all headed her direction. "Are you okay?" was Norman's first anxious question when she cranked down the window. She could not answer for tears. "Yep, she's fine," the policeman answered for her, but apparently the driver of the other car is seriously injured. It was a broadside collision. Dad had to know all the details, and once the policeman had verified the fact that we were Bertha's family, he explained how everything happened. It was the other fellow who had failed to see the stoplight, he assured us, and this young lady was not guilty. He gave Bertha a pat on the back, but she did not look amused. By now, we could see the other person being loaded into the back of the ambulance, and we noticed that he had been completely covered with a blanket. A lady in the crowd said loudly enough for us to hear that the coroner was sent for. "Apparently she's not a relative." Norman scowled in her direction, and we all followed him to the unfortunate little car. Dad had told the policeman that we wanted it towed to our farm. Once again, the front fender was damaged, this time beyond repair, and the suspension, as well as the wheels and the bumper, were pushed in. "I believe it's still fixable," Dad told Bertha, "but I'm sure glad you had your seatbelt on." "We'll all have to thank the Lord for his protecting hand," Mom added. "That's right," Dad said. "Why don't we do that right now?" So there we stood, a thankful little group on Parkside Avenue, with our hats off and heads bowed for a moment of silent prayer. Dad had also told us to be sure to include the injured person and his relatives in our prayers. Norman, I noticed, seemed visibly moved, and I wondered whether God might not have had a special reason for bringing us together in this unexpected way. The policeman thought it would be all right for us to take Bertha along home with us, and said we would see more of him later on. Suddenly, I remembered the corsage, but when I glanced at Bertha, I saw it had disappeared. She had tossed it into the park behind us, where it lay, already partially covered in the drifting snow. It was chore time when we arrived at home, and Norman was anxious to leave, but not before he had assured Bertha that he would undertake the repairs to her car himself. He worked at Gampat Tulsi's Auto Body, a garage that specialized in collision repair, and he felt sure he could get by with a lot less money than most anywhere else. Gampat himself, another one of our East Indian friends, often dropped by for fresh produce in the summer and loved to talk with Dad about religious things. We all knew he would do the best to get Bertha's car back on the road. Later that night, the police officer came, and we learned that the other driver, a native of Montreal, had been pronounced dead upon arrival at the St. Catherine Civic Hospital. He had been to Dorchester on a visit to his relatives, and the investigations after the accident proved that he had been drinking heavily. "We're in a bad time of the year for liquor-related mishaps," the officer told us, but fortunately he had no other passengers riding with him. The next morning, Dad, Mom, and Bertha went to see the bereaved relatives. Bertha also mailed a card to the young man's parents in Montreal. It was still hard, though, for her to accept the fact that she was not responsible, and for the first week Dad drove her to work. She claimed she felt like a murderer sitting behind the wheel. I found it even more sobering to know that yet another soul had entered eternity, unprepared. We could pray for the relatives, and we did. Yet more than this, what else could we do? As long as any of us stoners will live, I am sure Christmas 1977 will never be forgotten.